You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I'm going speed dating tonight, Ed.
Speed dating, you say?
Yeah, I didn't think that was a real thing. I thought that was something that, they just did on television shows. But I guess there's companies that run speed dating, and I'm going to one in downtown Chicago, because that's what happens when you combine a night out and you're drinking with friends, and somebody goes, you should sign up for this thing, and you get coaxed into it 3 months ago, and you paid your $30, and you get a reminder the other day hey, don't forget you signed up for this thing. And I'm going to go. We'll see what it's like. I already told the 108 guys when we were at Cork and Carry at the park for the big event on Friday. They asked about my dating life now. And because I think all men that are married, I'll let women in that are listening, I'll let them in on this dirty little secret. All men that are married, somewhere in the back of their mind, believe that if for some reason she looked at him tomorrow and said, I'm leaving you, they would go out there and it would be just like an episode of Entourage.
Right. It just women falling all over them, coming out of the woodwork.
Right.
You know, just you walk down the street and it's just all of a sudden oh, hey. And you're just, by the end of it, you're doing an Austin Powers opening theme sequence dance with a bunch of women behind you, and it's all choreographed.
I think that they believe that when the waitress winks at them, if it weren't for the old ball and chain hair, I'd be just like I was when I was 23. So those guys were asking me, they were really excited, we're doing the live show, and one of the questions I was asked was, about dating and dating apps, and I, laughed at them. I said, it sucks. I'm 47 years old. I'm not even trying, because the moment I went on one of those things, I laughed and said, this is stupid, and I deleted it. I don't think it lasted for more than 48 hours on my phone. So now I'm going to this event, and I'm well, at least here, I can speak to a living person. I have no expectations. And to be honest with you, this is going to be more for my own personal enjoyment. I hope to get really good content out of this that I could talk about on a future show. That's about all I'm doing it for. But I would like to see Chris Getz go speed date every managerial candidate he can possibly speed date. I want him.
I was going to say, is there a Tinder for major league managers to match up with teams? Is there a Bumble?
MLB Tinder, and I want him on it. I want him on MLB Tinder and MLB Bumble. I want him talking to every single possible candidate. And I want him to find a guy similar to, but not Grady Sizemore. And I'll explain that as we're brought to you by Cork and Carry at the park, 33rd and Princeton in the shadow of the ballpark. An amazing night on Friday night. Again, thanks to Rock 95.5 and from the 108. I had an absolute blast. You and I hung out afterwards and did the last show, which, by the way, there's a video version now on YouTube, so you can see us sitting out there if you go and check out that right now. But do that after the episode. And remember, award-winning burgers, incredible array of drinks and options at the bar, indoor, outdoor seating, see more at corkandcarry.com. But he should be looking at everyone. But I'm kind of enjoying some of the sour grapes right now. I'm kind of enjoying a little bit the AJ Pierzynski reaction to it's going to be somebody that is already in uniform and outside of the organization. You could tell AJ knows he's not an option anymore and is a little annoyed because every time he talks about it now, he's taking shots.
Well, and that's what AJ kind of does, right? I mean, he was taking shots at the team early on, and they're all justifiable shots. I mean, you and I were talking about it. There's absolutely, they're throwing targets on themselves, the White Sox are, for a guy like AJ to sit there and criticize the team. But, he is clearly perturbed that here's this thing that comes out that says that he's a legitimate candidate. That's got to be exciting for the guy, right? I mean, I know he's doing his thing right now, but the idea of getting back in uniform and managing a team has got to be something that AJ has considered, in his baseball lifetime, and if not his entire lifetime. I would submit, though, that you aren't necessarily saying that AJ is completely out of it. It's just that Chris Getz is kind of being smart about this in a certain way of sitting there saying, I'm going to look to guys that are already on major league staffs. I'm going to look outside the organization. I want to bring in fresh blood, fresh eyes, but also somebody who's already doing this. Somebody who's already with a team, somebody who's already handling something on the field. And I think what he would really like is someone who gets cast off from a job. I think he's really looking at Skip Schumacher and going, I want the Marlins to let him go because they're disappointed in his second season, even though they handed him a terrible team and he had terrible luck with his pitching staff.
I think they will, and I think he's probably the front runner. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, but he's definitely going to be somebody that they talk to. They're not going to talk to Ozzie because Ozzie, first of all, doesn't fit the criteria. And secondly, we talked about this a little bit already. I just don't think he's right. Like, I thought he was perfect for this year because they weren't going to win anything, so let's make it fun. And I thought he would be great to kick some guys in the butt and make them play a little bit harder. I would imagine he would be a lot more honest about what's going on with Yoan Moncada right now, who I don't think is ever going to be seen in a White Sox uniform again because he's constantly just a little bit sore and can't seem to finish his rehab. And I don't think that Yoan wants to be here. I think he wants to collect his $25 million and his $5 million buyout and stay away from Chicago because what's the point? And then go into free agency next year and say, well, I'm completely healthy and I want to remove myself of the stink of this team, which he was a part of. But I don't think we're going to see him anymore. And I think Ozzie would be really honest about that. And I think it'd be interesting. And I think he's the perfect guy for when you have your roster already set up to go and win. I just don't know if I want him around for the stage that they're at right now. And I don't think that Getz is considering him. The guy to consider would be a Grady Sizemore type, although I don't think you're going to hand him the job. I think Grady sticks around with whoever comes in because you got a young, fresh face, and it's all about mood. Like we've talked about this before, the majority of managers don't have a overtly positive or overtly negative impact on a team over 162, but they can have an effect if the mood is right. And you get rid of a guy like Pedro with all the acronyms, and you bring in a guy who's closer to their age, and you don't have somebody in there screaming and yelling at him and making threats like, hey, this is going to be on you if you're the worst team ever. And you can see the attitude change so quickly, not only on the team, but look at what Eloy Jimenez is doing after he got out of this place. Look at what Michael Kopech is doing after he got out of this place. It must have been terrible to work in there underneath Pedro and Tony beforehand. Getz needs to go find a guy that keeps the locker room even keel and connects with today's ball player and then just knows enough about the game for the X's and the O's. And he's going to make mistakes, whoever it is, but it's got to be somebody that has their finger on the pulse of today's player. And again, Schumacher, not that far removed from playing Major League Baseball. Again, that's why he's probably the front runner.
Yeah, and the Grady Sizemore type, but without necessarily being Grady Sizemore, doesn't fit the Ozzie Guillen profile either. If you're handing Ozzie Guillen a veteran team, if you're going to go out and spend money and collect guys off the scrap heap and try and maximize them and try and cobble together a winner on a budget, Ozzie might be your guy to sit there and take the ragtag bunch, because that's what he did in 2005, right? You know, give him a couple of stars and then give him a bunch of guys that he can maximize. And that's probably Ozzie's strong suit because he will identify with somebody who is a veteran better than I think what he would do with a rookie. And I'm not disparaging Ozzie by any stretch of the imagination. I think he'd be amazing with some of the rookies as well. But that always seemed to be what Ozzie was really, really good at, was sitting there saying, I know this game, I know the X's and O's, I know how to get what I need out of the players. And it's a lot easier to do with veterans. The other part of it is that, you know, you mentioned the mood in the dugout and getting to today's player and changing the culture. One of the things we've heard is that it is just disastrously bad to be a member of the White Sox right now. And, you know, you had, a member of the Dodgers going on to say it's kind of like a cancer over there. It's really something where a strong manager who not just keeps the dugout even keeled, but can actually keep guys with their chins up, because you're going to have teams that go through some stuff and go through some bad moments and are able to maintain the positivity, but also, like Grady Sizemore is doing, maintain some stability for these guys. Because I think that was one of the biggest problems Pedro had, was that guys were up and down and in and out of the lineup, and they're moving around positions sometimes. And I know Chris Getz likes the positional flexibility thing, but at the same time, there's something to be said about just sitting there saying, okay, Miguel Vargas, I'm going to play you in one position, and we're going to give you every opportunity here. Dominic Fletcher, I'm going to play you in one position. You're going to get every opportunity here. You'll know when your time is up, because you will either have succeeded or not. And we sort of saw that, but we sort of didn't with Pedro, especially with guys like Lenyn Sosa, right, who has been in and out, up and down, or even Corey Lee, who got jerked around back and forth while Martin Maldonado was here.
Sox in the Basement listeners, switch to a new age of life. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living. Maybe you're getting older. You're trying to figure out how to get around the house. You're afraid that you might hurt yourself. You're living alone. It's all about getting around on your own, living independently. Stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, even bathroom remodeling, all at Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. They work with your insurance and have 0% financing for qualified individuals. And Hyatt also has the latest and greatest in CPAP machines. If you're unhappy with your vendor, switch now. Get supplies directly mailed to you. And if you're down on the south side, stop by the showroom. They have testing rooms and they'll show you all your options you probably don't even know about. They also have the latest in continuous glucose monitors and any medical equipment you can probably think of. See everything Hyatt Home Medical Equipment has to offer at hhme.com. You can see that Getz is communicating with his new manager and his new manager is listening to his general manager. And that's what you need in a relationship between manager and GM. Either the manager is the guy that knows what he wants and tells the GM, go out and get me this. And that's hard to find as a manager that's that qualified that you want to just hand your team over, where a GM will be like, what do you need? I'll do it. If you don't have that, then what you want is a manager that understands what the front office wants and plays the guys the way they were intended as the general manager went out and got them and added them to the team. We haven't seen that in a while. You could tell that Tony wanted to be the first kind of manager that told Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams what he wanted. And Rick Hahn was like, wait a minute, I built this team a certain way. And there was a disconnect. You could really see it with Pedro. He was doing things differently than the way that Getz wanted to do them. Not only can you see that in what Chris Getz said after the firing, there was a philosophical difference, and the fact that Pedro thanked everybody except for Chris Getz. But look at Sizemore just in the very small sample size of the first few days that he has been around. Suddenly, Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets only play first base or DH. Vaughn has been consistently in the 4 spot with Sheets in the 5 spot, with Benintendi in the 3 spot since Grady Sizemore walked in the door. The Brooks Baldwin is playing every day at second base at the bottom of the lineup. He's no longer up at the top. You see Corey Lee catch 3 days in a row, regardless of a right-handed or left-handed starter. You see Miguel Vargas assigned directly to third base, and that's what he verbally has said is going to happen with him going forward. You see Corey Julks in the outfield, once against a lefty, once against a righty, but playing consistently out in the outfield, and the majority of these guys are locked in to specific roles in the lineup. Nicky Lopez is up at the top. I don't know if I love it, but it's there. When Luis Robert Jr. is playing, he's batting second. Benintendi's always third. Vaughn is always fourth. Sheets is always fifth. Vargas is always sixth. Lee is sitting between 6 and 7, depending on whether or not somebody comes out of the lineup. Fletcher's out there playing in the outfield, moving between the corner and being the backup at center field. This is how Getz intended his team to be used this year, and Pedro wouldn't do it. It's so clear now when you see the new guy come in and you hear the comments and you look at the last couple of days, everybody has a defined role. And look at the offensive output. Look at what they're doing. Forget the Monday night game. Their run differential through his first 3 games is +7. This is a dead offense that is finding a way to get hits all of a sudden because there's more consistency in the lineup. The guy who was in charge was so out of control and wasn't listening. He kept complaining about communication with the front office. That's because they were fighting. It's so obvious that they were fighting. It was so obvious that Getz wanted one thing, Pedro wanted the other, and at some point they just stopped speaking to each other. And then Getz couldn't get rid of him until Jerry allowed him to get rid of him. If you don't see that, I don't know what you've been watching this season. And you can see the difference immediately with a Grady Sizemore in there. If Getz is allowed to pick his manager without massive interference from Tony La Russa and Jerry Reinsdorf, then I think you will start to see the ship at least plug a lot of the holes and stop sinking.
Well, yeah, and you know, to your point about there being managers out there that want to run the show, that works in an organization where you have a general manager who has the resources to go out and replace players easily. and get guys easily and pay for guys. If you want to be a Tony La Russa and have a certain type of team that's built around whatever Tony La Russa wanted to build around, it's really unclear in this last go around. But if you want a certain type of team, then if your general manager is going to be handcuffed by the owner's wallet and is not going to be able to go out and say, okay, I can get these type of players, because sometimes you have to overpay for them to get the type of player you want, because another team may not want to give them up, or they may want to go somewhere else and you're going to have to give them more of a contract than what, you're normally willing to offer or what's within your budget. It works a whole heck of a lot better for, I would say, 75% of major league rosters to sit there and have a manager and a general manager who are on the same page, where the manager is going to say, okay, this is how we should construct the team. And the general manager goes, I agree. This is what we're already doing, especially when you're trying to bring in a brand new manager. So yeah, if Getz is allowed to sit there and say, okay, Skip Schumacher, you're Tony's guy, right? You're the front runner, but here's the deal. I construct the team. You do what I tell you to do with the lineup. This is going to work out well. You give me input on how these guys are performing and whether or not I need to replace somebody with a like and kind player, and I can probably do that. But you start dictating to me that we're a team that is 3 true outcomes. I want high on base percentage. I want a lot of home runs. Well, we're not that. We're not going to be that for about, it's going to take us years to get to that.
I don't think you even want to be that, but I think the thing, you've already shown what the problem would be with Schumacher if he is Tony's guy and Getz is accepting of that. He has to be legitimately Getz's pick. Because if he's not legitimately Getz's pick, and Schumacher knows that, it could be all rosy for 6 months to a year. And at some point, Schumacher won't agree with something that Getz wants to do, and he will call Tony. And then Tony will go to Jerry, and then they'll call Getzy into a room, and suddenly they'll cut his legs out from underneath him. And that's the problem with the structure inside of this organization. It's why Jerry Reinsdorf has to go away. He has to leave, because that is the real fear. Skip Schumacher might be the perfect guy for this job, but if he walks in feeling that in a conflict with his general manager, or if he just doesn't agree with him, he can go to Tony, and Tony's going to work his way through Jerry to help out his boy. There's a problem. And it will all just blow up, and we'll just continue to see the same thing that we always see. And again, that's why Jerry Reinsdorf has to go. Did you see the thing with the banner? There's some guy who put it up on Twitter, and he had a sell the team banner. And first of all, I'm very supportive of the Chicago police and police officers in general. I spent 10 years as a 911 dispatcher for Cook County Sheriff's Police. My father, 34 years a veteran with CPD. My mother injured on the job as a state investigator undercover, okay? We're a police family. I know there's a lot of off-duty police officers that are hired as security, and I'm aware of it as I say this, but that was ridiculous. If you're sitting there swearing at the guy with the banner, trying to antagonize him so that he fights with you so you can throw him out of the stadium. And that's what that video looks like to me. Because the owner doesn't want to have anything bad said about him, you look terrible. Shame on. I understand they have a job. I understand that they're feeding their families. I understand it. But you know what? There was a point where you sit there and say, put it away. You've been warned, and you walk away. Does Jerry give out bonuses if you harass the fans? That was ridiculous. And when you see the fights that were going on the concourse during Cubs Sox, like I've seen 2 videos back to back on Twitter. One of them was the amount of attention, the amount of security trying to get a sign that said sell the team off of one fan and trying to antagonize the fan who kept calm. And that's why they never got his sign off him, because he didn't take the bait and get into an altercation with security, even though they kept tugging on the thing in his hand. And this guy saying stay calm. Meanwhile, there's a huge Donnybrook video that occurs out there on the concourse. And when security shows up, they're just kind of putting their hands like, all right, everybody calm down. I don't see anybody getting tackled. I saw punches thrown, people on the ground. One guy looked like he was knocked out. It took at least 3-4 minutes for somebody to get over there and start doing something about it. And it felt like the reaction to the sell the team sign was more intense than the reaction to a full-out 15-person brawl going on while children are trying to walk by. Your priorities are backwards in that ballpark. And again, that's why people are bringing signs that say, sell the team. And you know what? There's a rule on the website. Somebody pointed out to me about banners, if they're offensive, right? If there's something like, I don't even know if sell the team honestly is considered to be offensive. But if they want to try to find a way like, well, you're offending Jerry Reinsdorf, so that is offensive to us, whatever they do. But it's just banners. Again, I go back to what I said the other night. You need enough guys who will write enough letters on enough bare chest to stand out there in the outfield. Let's see them try to remove all of that. Get creative. You got 2 more months left. Get your voice heard out there at the ballpark. You have to spend money to walk in still, even though they should be giving away the tickets for free. If it's better at the ballpark, then make it better for yourself. I'm all for it, and I applaud every single person that's sneaking something in there so they can put up a clown mask of Jerry, or they can put up a sign that says he should sell the team. He should wear this, and he should wear it until the day he's no longer in charge.
We talked about it, you and I. We talked about respect a little bit on Friday in the show that we did at Cork and Kerry, where one of the ways that Jerry is disrespecting the fan base here is, again, pandering to us and telling us it's better at the ballpark, but then his whole idea is that, well, if I give you fun milkshakes and we do fireworks and stuff like that, that is what people come out for. They come out for the real estate. They come out for, this sort of experience of what the ballpark itself has to offer, which is what a real estate guy like Jerry would probably think. But it's not a hotel. It's not a fun park necessarily. The idea behind a Major League Baseball park is I want to go there and I want to watch a baseball game. I want to watch good baseball. I don't want to watch bad baseball. I want to watch good baseball. And yeah, I do want some comforts there. I want some good food. And, I want my drinks to be cold and I want it to be very easy to get everything. And I want it to be very easy to get in and out of the ballpark. What you have, though, is if you have people who are sitting there harassing fans over banners, but not breaking up fights and making it safe. If you have, people in the past couple of years who are banished to the 500 level when nobody is downstairs and the concession stands, there's maybe one open because there's nobody upstairs either, but you're stuck up there because they won't let you down, then you're not being accommodating to your fans. I think there's plenty of White Sox fans who would rather have a crumbling ballpark that only sold hot dogs, Cracker Jacks, cold beer, and pop than worry about a campfire milkshake or, walking tacos or any of the other food items. I mean, it's all great stuff, don't get me wrong, but if we had a consistently winning team and when you walked into that ballpark, you were treated like you were very important to the team and you were very important to the people working there, and not treated with disdain and not treated like the enemy and not treated like a criminal, it would be better at the ballpark. But it's not, because we're supposed to be impressed by the building at 35th and Shields. We're supposed to be impressed by the amenities of the building at 35th and Shields. And we're supposed to forget why we're there in the first place. I mean, it's like going to the fanciest movie theater you can think of and being forced to watch reruns of Barney.
One of the best parts about the ballpark is Dave Marin, the Sox nerd, putting all those tidbits up on the scoreboard at the rate, and the folks that do all that hard work to make things enjoyable. And the Sox nerd is brought to you today by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. I was there on Saturday night and came upon a festival. There is always something going on. See what's coming up next at LamontDowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, here are a few nuggets I dug up on the White Sox recent managerial change. This is the first time the Sox have dismissed a manager during a season since Terry Bevington replaced Gene Lamont 32 games into the 1995 season. Yes, Ozzie Guillen did not survive the 2011 campaign, but he was traded to the Miami Marlins at season's end. And we all know Tony La Russa, the sequel, ended for health reasons 128 games into the 2022 schedule. This is the 17th time the Sox have changed managers during the season. Of those skippers, Johnny Evers, Roy Schalk, Al Lopez, and Bob Lemon were eventually inducted into the Hall of Fame. Grady Sizemore just turned 42. The last manager to assume command of the Sox at a younger age was 40-year-old Ozzie Guillen in 2004. By the way, the youngest manager in Sox history was Jimmy Callahan, who got the job at age 29 in 1903. A little over a season into what would be the first of his 2 tenures on the Sox bench, Callahan was the first manager to be replaced by the Sox during a season. Callahan wasn't fired, though. Per the June 5th, 1904 Tribune, Callahan stepped down as manager to concentrate on playing second base. He was replaced by Fielder Jones in a move the Trib called amicable. The second time the Sox changed managers during a season, it was in 1924, but again, it wasn't a firing. 21 games into the campaign, Johnny Evers was felled by appendicitis and was replaced first by Ed Walsh and then Eddie Collins before returning on June 19th. The third time the Sox had an in-season managerial change was in 1928. But guess what? It was not a firing either. On July 4th, Schalk ended his 17-year tenure with the Sox by resigning with the team at 34-42. He was replaced by Lena Blackburn. The next time the Sox changed skippers in a season, we finally got a firing. With the Sox mired in last place, J. Lou Comiskey, the son of the old Roman, fired Lou Fonseca on May 8, 1934. Fonseca, whom I met at Wrigley Field on June 9, 1979, when he was 80 and I was 14, was replaced by Jimmy Dykes, who went on to manage the most games and the most wins in Sox history. Other Sox in-season managerial firings other than the ones I mentioned were Bob Lemon on June 30th, 1978, and La Russa on June 20th, 1986. Before I get to my zinger, a reminder, you can access my blog at soxinthebasement.com, and there's plenty of Sox nerd material on Twitter and on the scoreboard at Guaranteed Rate Field. My zinger? Monday's 12-2 win over the Yankees provided me with a plethora of zingers, but my favorite was this one. That game marked the 6th time the Sox had walked 11 batters in a game against the Yankees. It was the first time that they had won one of those games. That's it, Chris. More than you wanted to know about Bevington, Fonseca, and 11 walk wins.
I'm almost, as a fan, going to look at statistics of players from when Pedro was out. Like, I'm really curious what Luis Robert Jr. does from this point forward. And I love the fact that he was benched on Monday night. And I'm curious as to what Miguel Vargas does from this point forward. I'm curious how this team will react to the new guy that's in charge. I think we will get some false hope. I think we will see a couple of guys, like I said, I am firmly in the camp of you can't have both Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn on this team. And maybe Chris Getz believes that too, because one is a DH and one is a first baseman, and that's it. And he may get to a point in the offseason where he says, well, we can do better at DH than this. Very easily, you could put something better in there if you start to try to improve your team. So they're almost like placeholders at this point. In fact, that's one of the other things that encourages me is a lot of things that we've said about who these guys are. That's how they're lining up in the order right now. That's the role that they've had since the new manager is in there. That makes me excited and gives me just hope that I'm going to see some of these young pitchers get up here in the next month or so. I'm going to see players used the right way, and I'm curious as to what their stats are here at the back half of the season. They're not going to be as bad as their pace was before Pedro. Grady's not going to be the savior. We're not going to be sitting there saying, well, we should keep him around going forward, I don't think. But I think it'll be interesting to see who performs in the next month and a half, because if they do, then I can erase what they were doing with Pedro a little bit more in my mind. This is going to be a proving ground, and that's what we have to watch right now as White Sox fans.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.